when you think about how they go about this Hall of Fame voting process, it's really cute to me. It really is. I love baseball. Always have, always will. It was my first love in sports. My dad played baseball. I played Little League. I love the game. Love it. Always have, always will till the day I die. But my biggest criticism of baseball, and particularly Major League Baseball, is more than any sport and more than any league, boy, are they stuck in their ways. Boy, do they operate and have the mentality of like the 1950s and 60s. Heck, that's the only baseball players you hear about. No disrespect to the great Mickey Mantle. I hear about Mickey Mantle more than I do Mike Trout or Shohei Ohtani or Mookie Betts. Is that there's not an emphasis on promoting the great players today. There's this keep the tradition. No, I'm not like anti-tradition at all, but that word just makes me roll my eyes. And what I think is funny about this Hall of Fame thing is that these baseball writers who keep Bonds, Clemons, A-Rod, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, we could go on, out of the Hall of Fame, is that there's this sort of self-righteous, holier-than-thou sort of mentality. We must keep the game pure. And the Hall of Fame, this sacred, pure museum. More on the museum part later. When, in all actuality, and this is the case in life, you know somebody who's got this holier-than-thou mentality? Or those in public life who have that? Oftentimes, this has been proved, it's them who have the biggest skeletons in their closet. And Major League Baseball might as well have a cemetery in their closet compared to other sports. No sport, and it's not even close, has a history and a reputation of cheating more than baseball. None. We can go from the 1919 Black Sox all the way 98 years later to the 2017 Houston Astros. And all in between. It is the biggest stain on Major League. Actually, I would say it's the second biggest stain to the fact that how they treated black players and Latino players coming into the sport. How they treated Jackie Robinson. How my biggest disgust of the Boston Red Sox, even as a fan, is that they were the last team to integrate. The last team to sign a black player. They don't want you to remember that. The writers don't. But they act like the steroids is just, oh my goodness, it is a crime on the sport. Am I excusing steroids? Not in the slightest. Here's my issue. If you're going to leave Bonds out, and you're going to leave McGwire out, and Sosa out, and Clemons out, you have to kick out every single player in the steroid era. You cannot let one in. Because let's be real. Everybody in that time period was roided up. They were. That was what the era called for. And eventually, the commissioner at the time, Bud Selig, made it the virtual death sentence punishment of Major League Baseball that has continued to this day. That's what it is. But when we have this sort of, again, self-righteous mentality of the Hall of Fame that, oh, only certain guys go in because we want to maintain the purity of the sport. What purity? Oh, what are you talking about? Baseball has had more scandals than any league in American pro sports. And it ain't even close. I mean, let's just say, let me just put it in a vacuum. Make it as simple as possible. If you were talking to somebody about the leaders, right? The kings of each statistical category in different sports, right? If you want to talk about, in the NFL, who's got the most rushing yards? It's Emmitt Smith. Who's got the most passing yards and passing touchdowns? It's Tom Brady. Who's got the most receiving yards? It's Jerry Rice by a mile. Who's got the most sacks? It's Bruce Smith. All these different numbers in the NFL. They would automatically assume, oh, well, yeah, duh. If there's a Hall of Fame, they're in it. Duh. I mean, come on. Just go and put them in right now. Which, yeah, Emmitt Smith's in the Hall of Fame, and Bruce Smith, and Jerry Rice, and Tom Brady. In my opinion, I've said this before, I think they should disregard the whole first ballot thing. Just go and put him in if he retires this year. Just go and put him in right now. He's the most obvious Hall of Famer ever. What if I told you that in Major League Baseball, in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, that the all-time leader in hits, home runs, and Cy Young Awards, none of those guys were in the Hall of Fame? It makes me laugh. It's actually kind of funny that the leaders in these categories. Now, look, if you want to talk about Bonds and Hank Aaron and say Hank Aaron's the home run king, I concur. I agree with you. I will always know Hank Aaron and regard him as the home run king. But Bonds does have the record. And Roger Clemens does have 7 Cy Youngs. Okay. And Pete Rose does have 4,256 hits. That stuff kind of matters. Being a great pitcher, that usually wins you World Series if you have a good run support behind you. And if you put the ball in the air and into the seats, usually means you're pretty good. And especially if you get hits a lot, isn't that kind of what baseball is about offensively, is getting on base, in the most simplest form in doing so is getting a hit? I mean, come on. I mean, Pete Rose, 17-time All-Star, 3-time World Series champion, World Series MVP, NL MVP, NL Rookie of the Year, 2-time Gold Glove winner, Silver Slugger winner, Roberto Clemente Award, 3-time batting champion, all-time leader in hits. No, we're going to keep him out because he gambled. Am I excusing that he gambled as a player? No. But was he like those Black Sox in betting against his own team? That would be different if he was betting against his own Cincinnati Reds, the Big Red Machine of the 70s. But he wasn't. He gambled as a manager. So because he gambled as manager, we're just going to disregard his entire playing career and ban him from the Hall of Fame. We know what's going to happen is that Mr. Rose is going to pass away one day, then we'll put him in. Then we'll put him in before he gets to witness it. And years down the road, we'll put Bonds in. When the kids of that day is like, who's Barry Bonds? Who is that? And who's Roger Clemens? These guys can't have their time in the sun. Because they're the only guys who have ever cheated in the history of Major League Baseball. Only guys. That's it. That's it. And if you want to throw out Curt Schilling, fine. As a Red Sox fan, I could care less if Curt Schilling is in the Hall of Fame or if he's out the Hall of Fame. Because he's a racist crazy head, okay? He's an idiot. I could care less if that guy's in the Hall of Fame. But in regards to Alex Rodriguez, who I don't like, never have liked A-Rod, especially as a Sox fan, A-Rod's a Hall of Famer. Stop. He's got multiple MVPs. He's a Hall of Famer. Pete Rose is a Hall of Famer. Okay, Barry Bonds, pre-steroids, was a Hall of Famer. So we're just going to completely disregard his entire career just because he took steroids. Really? Roger Clemens was great before steroids. Steroids really just elongated his career. Sosa and McGwire saved baseball with the home run chase of 1998. People were interested. People tuned in. The ratings were big. Yeah, it's great. No, but no, we're going to kick you out the Hall of Fame. Really? Really? Again, the writers for this are an absolute joke. The fact that, and I get the people out there who say, well, you got baseball and they're trying to preserve this sort of, I guess, quote unquote, gentleman sort of, I don't know what. But no sport has more skeletons in their closet than Major League Baseball. Some ain't even in the closet. Some are out the closet, right? All the cheating scandals. And they dealt with racism worse than any sport in the 20th century. But we must have integrity. Stop. It's a museum. This is where people are going to go to Cooperstown to learn more about the greatest players in the history of the sport. That's what Hall of Fames are for. What do we talk about all the time when, and I'm going to talk about Ben Roethlisberger later in the show. What do we talk about when a great player retires or a former great player retires? Are they a Hall of Famer? And what's the number one question that always comes up in response? Well, can you tell the story of the game without them? You're telling me you could tell the story of baseball without Barry Bonds, who was walked in general over 200 times in a season one time. They walked him over 200 times. There was one instance where the San Francisco Giants are down by 2 runs. In the bottom of the 9th inning, there are 2 outs, and the bases are loaded. They intentionally walked Bonds to bring a run across. They're like, we would rather let a run score than you bat against us, mind you, with 2 outs. So no sacrifice flies in play. It's a joke. It is actually laughable. It'd be laughable if it wasn't sad. It's a museum. We're telling the story of the game. You can't tell the story of the game without the guys I just mentioned. You can't. It's ridiculous. The Pete Rose one is what makes me mad more than any of them. I mean, I'm pissed that Bonds and Clemons and Sosa, McGuire, again, who made baseball relevant. Okay, 1994, they literally had a strike midseason, canceled the World Series. There was no champion that year. The sport was dead throughout the mid-1990s. And when Sammy Sosa, Mark McGuire of the Chicago Cubs and the St. Louis Cardinals, respectively, were in their home run chase, 2 rival teams, 2 of the greatest power hitters we've ever seen. Who's going to win? Who's going to win? Who does? For excitement, which baseball purists seem to be opposed to. Don't show emotion, right? We don't want to be too excited. We have to, kind of sit in our seats and just clap. It's like, guys, it's fun. It's a game. These are the same people that get mad at guys who celebrate after a home run. Same. Lord have mercy. I mean, I'm sorry. If the guy who has the most home runs ever, the guy who has the most hits ever, the guy who has the most Cy Youngs ever, if they're not in the Hall of Fame, I don't even know how you have a Hall of Fame at that point. Those are about as important numbers. It's not like it's not like this meaningless record. These meaningless records, these tell the story of the game. Isn't that the point of the Hall of Fame? To respect and celebrate great players in the history of the sport, as well as, tell the story of baseball. People don't want to talk about the fact that one of the greatest pitchers ever, Ty Cobb of the Detroit Tigers, was about one of the worst human beings and biggest racists in the sports history. But steroids are just, you can't have them in the Hall of Fame. Really? I'm not in any way advocating saying Ty Cobb should be out of the Hall of Fame. I don't agree with just about anything that man ever said in his life. We're talking about a baseball career on the field, on the diamond. Were you the best? Can the story of the game be told without you? And the answer for all the guys I just mentioned are a big fat no. Yeah, it pisses me off. It really, really does. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. Be sure to click that big red subscribe button and go check out the other clips and full shows of Carving It Up Live. Have a blessed day.